Welcome everybody. We are about to start our panel on fairness for international students. And before we begin, I want to start with a land acknowledgement. And I want to begin this panel by acknowledging that I am joining from unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin territories. And reflecting on Canada Day, which just happened yesterday, it is really important to recognize that that is a celebration of a state that has been built on colonialism and the genocide of Indigenous peoples. And as an immigrant myself, it is expected of me to be grateful and to be complacent in return with a state that is allowing me to be here. However, the same state that has scrutinized me and charged me a high price for permanence is the same state that continues to display and kill First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities, and that is responsible for the ongoing genocide of Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit, and LGBTQ+ folks, water advisories, food insecurity, and many, many more atrocities. So as an immigrant, I'm not grateful or thankful to Canada. As I continue to settle here, I will continue to reflect and act on how I can play a role in the decolonization that is needed to restore justice for Indigenous communities while I continue to occupy this land. And I also encourage other international students or other newcomers and immigrants to join in that reflection and to educate ourselves on the realities that are really currently happening in Canada and Indigenous communities. So having said that, I want to welcome our panelists. So folks can turn on their cameras as well. And before I introduce our panelist today, I want to also introduce the collaborators of the series that have made this panel possible. So thank you so much for the Continuing Education of Students Association of Ryerson, known as CESAR, which represents over 16,000 students registered in continuing education, distance education off campus, and part-time degrees courses at Ryerson University, and is the local one of five of the Canadian Federation of Students, as well as the Ryerson Faculty Association, that is the certified bargaining unit for tenure-track faculty, limited term faculty, librarians, and counselors at Ryerson University. The newly formed Ryerson Graduate Students Union, congratulations, which supports Ryerson graduate students through their academic pursuits, program-specific initiatives, and host networking events, as well as the Jack Layton Chair at Ryerson University, which promotes progressive social change and strengthening political capacity at Ryerson University. The chair aims to help students explore their sense of engagement, injustice issues, and is a collaborative partnership between the Faculty of Arts and the Faculty of Community Services. And last but not least, the Canadian Federation of Students, which is the largest organization in Canada, representing over 500,000 students and 62 student unions across Canada. The Federation represents domestic and international students at the college, undergraduate, and graduate levels, including full-time and part-time students. So really excited to be here. My name is Sofia. I use she and her pronouns. I'm currently the chairperson for the Canadian Federation of Students at the national level. I was also a former international student for about 5 years. I went to university at Memorial University in Newfoundland and Labrador. Pretty acquainted with the struggles of international students, so I'm really happy to be moderating this panel and also hearing the really brilliant insights of our panelists. So thank you, Ayat, for being here to give your perspective as an international student studying at Ryerson. So thank you, Wesam, again, for being here to give your perspective as an international student and graduate student at Western University. As well as thank you, Ankit, for joining us to give your perspective as an international student and also the international student representative at the CFS. So I will let you folks introduce yourselves, and you can show your pronouns if you're comfortable. I'll start with Ayat.
Hi everyone, my name is Ayat Rizvi. My pronouns are she and her. I am going into my second year of civil engineering at Ryerson University, and I'm an international student from Kuwait.
Welcome, Ayat. Wesam? You're muted, Wesam.
Is it working right now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry for that. Hi folks, I'm Wesam. I'm currently the graduate student representative in the Canadian Federation of Students on the national level. I just finished my degree at Western. I just finished the master's as an international student at Western University in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. And I used to be the international student representative over the past year at the Canadian Federation of Students on the national level as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wesam, for being here. And Ankit?
Hi everyone, my name is Ankit. My pronouns are he and him. I'm from Local 71, Trent Central Student Association at Trent University in Peterborough, Ontario. I am in my last year of a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science and Business Administration. I'm very happy to be here. I've been an international student in Canada for about 4 years and happy to share my insight.
Such a powerful panel. Can't wait to get started. So I'll just dive into the first question. And this is for each speaker. So what were some of the challenges that you faced as an international student in Canada, and how did you handle them? So I'll start in reverse with Ankit.
All right, yes. So as mentioned, I went to Trent University. It's a pretty small university in Peterborough in Ontario. It's, populations like of the university is 9,000 students. I started in summer of 2016 and the intake had just 2 people, me and one other person. Trent is really small and there wasn't much going on. So loneliness was a major challenge. Just getting used to the curriculum was another one. As in, I was expected to understand the content and not just memorize everything. And that was a bit of a challenge, I'm not gonna lie. I couldn't deal with most of it at first, but eventually I made some friends in class. I went for runs around campus and saw academic skills a lot. Like I had an appointment every week. I was trying to navigate the entire thing all by myself. Funny thing, back then, Trent University didn't have any orientation for summer intake. So trying to figure out the entire campus and the city and the country all by myself without much guidance was very difficult, but it took people to show me the way. And so I just got out there, made some friends in my classes, and academic skills was very understanding. They gave me basic tips like how to take the bus. And so that's what got me through my first few months in Trent. But then as soon as I got the opportunity, I put myself out there in the coming fall, and I made sure never to look back again.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I totally understand the feeling of loneliness, or something as, supposed to be simple as taking the bus. It's really a shock when you come from another country and you don't really know the system. So all things are sometimes think as granted or common knowledge. It's really not for international students. Now let's hear from Wesam. How was your experience here in Canada?
So, yeah, I'm gonna try to put it in like 10 minutes, but I'd say what an experience. I spent almost 3 years in Canada as an international student. And before I actually arrived to Canada, I pictured my student life experience would be perfect. But it doesn't take that long until you actually start struggling and start experiencing the problems within the system that actually that you can see the lack of infrastructure to support the international students. So I'm talking about like the lack of public health, at least at Ontario, when you struggle to weigh in whether you actually need to visit the physician or not, and whether it's worth your money or not. And you get into a position where you're thinking about like, how much is your health actually worth to whether pay the money in front or not. I'm also speaking about the lack of opportunities and the lack of funding for international students compared to domestic students. So I remember my first month at the university, and like while everyone was exploring different funding opportunities, different applications for scholarships, you would find that compared to domestic students, you have like 1/10 of the opportunities, if not even less. And that's not based on like what are your qualifications, or what is whether you're actually able to make it through the application process or not, rather than it's just an eligibility requirement. If you're just an international student, you're out of the pool. You're not eligible to even apply. And through the experience, you get to see like how sometimes you feel as if you're treated as a second-class citizen, and how it's challenging to go through the journey or the experience of being a student if you are just an international student. You're facing different struggles, you're facing different challenges compared to domestic students, and you're not seeing enough support, and you're not seeing enough of infrastructure to basically get you go through this journey easily. And there are stereotypes that we face as international students when you actually get to speak with domestic students or officials or uh, employees at the university, or employees at like the city, or like at different forums. If you get to speak with people, you will find that one of the most common stereotypes that actually pose a challenge on us to go through our journey is a stereotype that international students are crazy rich students, and they are here based on their income and their family support. And it's actually not true. Yes, there are some of the international students who are doing very well financially, but on the other hand, I would say the majority of us are basically struggling to make ends meet. Some of us work one job, or some of us work two jobs besides school just to make ends meet. Some of us take loans back at their home countries to just go through the journey of education. Some of us put their families in precarious situations by asking them to take loans. And when you get to spend time in Canada, you get to realize how there is unfairness or like injustice in the system, and how it is much more difficult for you to go through the journey just based on the fact that you're an international student. So yeah, that's pretty much how my experience, and how I actually got to see some of my friends go through their experiences, and some of the stories that I'm hearing through my positions at the CFS.
Absolutely. I mean, you're raising like some very real points that we're going to touch on later in the panel, as like access to funding, access to healthcare, and lack of access to healthcare for better description of the current system, as well as the stereotypes that international students face. And the myth of being wealthy is really, I feel like, what frames public policy in terms of international students. So yeah, definitely going to touch us on that. So thank you so much for sharing what a lot of international students face and feel when they come to Canada. And Ayat, what are the challenges and the experience that you face being an international student here in Canada, and how did you handle them?
Yeah, so wow, whatever my fellow panelists Ankit and Wesam said, I completely agree with that. I had a bad perception of Canada too when I was back home. You know, I thought it's going to be perfect, it's going to be amazing, I'm going to attend all the parties, it's going to be fantastic. But yeah, it came crumbling down pretty quick. I think one of the biggest challenges for me was I'm new to Canada. I've only been here for less than a year, and about a few weeks before I came, I lost a very close family member, and that put me in a very dark place. I wasn't ready to go into university and start classes and do my labs and do assignments and projects. in one way or another depressed. I wasn't making any friends. I was very lonely, you can say. The world was kind of closing in on my dorm room and I didn't know what to do. But I think around the second month, I told myself, you know, you have to get better, that you cannot literally fail in your courses. You're paying so much amount of money. So that's when I took a walk. And when I went on that walk, I saw a poster. And that poster was from CESAR, believe it or not. It said, if you wanted to volunteer, email this person. So I guess the next day I shot him an email and then I got on the volunteer list. And I volunteered for every event. To be honest, that was such a liberating moment. You know, it really helped my mental health. It really opened up different doors for me. I felt like I could now go out of that safe space that I was in. I could explore new things. I could make new friends, make connections, and that's exactly what I did. And now, thankfully, I'm in a very happy place. And yeah, being an international student is hard.
Yeah, well said, being an international student is definitely hard. And thank you so much for sharing your experience and your story here with us. And it talked to the point of the kind of mental health resources that are on campuses and how international students can access them, and all compounded with the inferior fees and access to healthcare and lack of funding opportunities. It definitely paints a very dire picture for international students here. So having folks from different points in their journey as international students in this panel is really going to paint a really robust picture about the realities that a lot of students are facing. So speaking of realities, I mean, we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and really what we're interested in knowing is, like, how is the current COVID-19 pandemic impacting international students? And I'll start with Ayat. What do you think is happening right now?
I think one of the major ways in which it's impacting us, and it has impacted me as well, is in terms of housing. So when the decision came of Ryerson University that it was going to turn into essentially from in-person to online, in a few days we got an email from the residents that they were closing down, and if you wanted to go, you should go now and you can get your refund and everything. And I took off. So I left my residence and I left everything downtown. I went to stay like 4 hours away. And that wasn't the best experience. I didn't have a lot of resources. I needed to move out. So I had to search a place and had to find housing myself. I felt like the university hasn't done its part for us as international students to provide that resources to tell us that, okay, when you're looking for residence housing or when you're looking for places, this is what you'll need. These are the documents. This is what the landlord will tell you. They didn't say anything else. And I know a bunch of people actually who stayed back in residence because they had no support, no family here, nowhere to go to. That was one of the biggest things that has impacted me. And of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's left us all in like a uncertain time. And it's very much more uncertain for us because I know that whenever like we hear summer, winter break, we think about, okay, let's book a ticket, let's go back home. But right now that's kind of not possible. And all I want to do is go back home and be with my parents and be with my friends. But hope to see a better day in the future.
Absolutely. And I mean, you pointed out really, like, you nailed it when you say, you know, universities and colleges have a special responsibility with international students to ensure that international students have housing and have affordable housing and like are able to stay here since they are the ones recruiting international students. So having support support after you're here is something that institutions need to take very seriously, especially with what is happening right now. And before I go to Ankit to hear his perspective, I just want to let folks know that you can ask your questions in the chat, and we'll accommodate to hear what panelists have to say. So feel free to ask away. And now, Ankit, what is your perspective on international students facing COVID-19 here?
Yeah, international students during COVID-19 is such a specific case that often doesn't get talked about because every level of administration, from universities to government, is like overwhelmed with everything else that's going on. Yeah, they have to think about businesses. Yeah, they have to think about people's mental health. But you can't ostracize from all the systems and decision-making your future citizens. International students do stay back in vast numbers. Canada's base population rate has been declining for years. That's why we immigrate. They need us as much as we want to come here. And in that respect, I don't think international students have been treated well enough. In my own university, it was a struggle to get the university to even start considering students' struggles and perspectives. It came to a point where the students' unions started just writing their own FAQ pages, which were then co-opted by the university. And they were like, okay, this makes sense. We can put all the resources in one place. I remember having a particular moment of outrage, with a bunch of organizers on my campus, of when the university stated that there are mental health supports that students can access. And I remember, like, how are we going to access these properly? There are 9,000 students and 4 counselors. It's unreal. It's not fair to expect all of us to just access the same resources. International students have access to one exclusive counselor if they wish to, which, again, there's 900 of us. We're 10% of the population, 900 students, one counselor, and everybody's mental health is going down the drain. Please help me out. I don't think it's been fair at any level. Then we started with the exception of international students from CESB. If you're one of those few international students who managed to work enough to make $5,000 in the last year, which is like relatively unlikely, you're not going to get CERB either. And if they at any point of time decided that we were not worthy, then next year we were going to have to pay back anywhere between $4,000 to $8,000. And then all of that is completely independent of the fact that we're paying for our own healthcare, we're paying for our own education, we're paying for our own bus pass. None of that is covered. So we're just coming here, giving you our money for you to continue to just extort it out of us in a time like a pandemic. It's beyond unfair.
Absolutely, it is definitely inhumane the way the international students are being treated currently. Before the pandemic, even more so, it is highlighted. It's being way more acute now that we're living through COVID-19. And what about you, Wesam? What do you think is happening?
So, like, first of all, thank you for that question, because I think that's a good opportunity to highlight the challenges that international students are facing during COVID-19 and how unique those challenges are compared to domestic students. And I think the most problematic issue that international students are facing is the uncertainties. Like Ayat said, we're living through uncertainties. We don't know what is going to happen tomorrow or what is going to happen in the next academic year. And we are generally living in a fear of being forgotten. And I would say that this kind of fear is not coming from nowhere. We have seen that international students have been already excluded from CESB, which is a benefit for all the students in Canada except international students. And through these kind of decisions, we experience more isolation and lack of supports compared to domestic students. I remember when COVID-19 hit and it was declared as a pandemic, and then universities closed. Most of my domestic friends just took the decision to go back to their families and live with their families. They didn't go through the same struggles we're going through of like, what is going to happen at the end of my lease? What is happening if I can't even go back to my family because like airports are closed or like there is a travel ban? What is going to happen during this summer? Can I go back for the next academic year or not? So I would say that COVID-19 showed that like international students are a very vulnerable demographic, and they need a lot of support. And during COVID-19, it was just highlighted how there is a lack of support for international students and how we are frequently forgotten through the system and through the government.
Absolutely. And like what I've been hearing from folks, I mean, saying that it's feeling of uncertainty, feeling forgotten, but also the fact that the government needs us. I mean, they want international students to come. They want skilled workers to come here to Canada. And it's just a matter of also using international students as disposable people. So come here, you pay yourself out, there's no support for you, and even if you want to immigrate, it's out of your own pocket, which is outrageous considering that like last year, the federal government invested $144 million to recruit international students. So there is money for recruitment to fill spaces at universities or colleges, but for some reason there's no money to include international students on the Canada Emergency Student Benefit, or to provide more funding to universities and colleges so that we can end differential fees for once and for all, or to, you know, provide more protections for international students. And it is really up to not only international students, but everybody to ensure that this is rectified and this is changed. So we have a question from the audience that says, what considerations should student leaders be taken for international students who won't be able to return to Canada for the fall term due to the pandemic? And this is opened to the whole panel. So I can start with Ankit. I don't know if you want to take a shot at this.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, so something that we've been doing on specifically our campus, and I'm happy to share this with everyone. The administration hears from us a lot, like a lot. Every week, we sit down and tell them what they're doing wrong. And if we're gonna go through this, let me just tell you, if you ever try to approach your administration, their primary goal is to derail you instead of hear you out. So you're going to be faced with distracting questions. You're going to be faced with alternative issues, all of that, just so that none of you end up actually discussing what you're there for. So talk to your administration, hound them. And if at any point of time they bring up concerns of, is that what students want, and any other issues, you can immediately start a petition. Petitions are currently being filled out very quickly. Everybody's on their phones on some kind of electronic means. And that means that if at any point administration is unsure of what the students think, they can be made aware of that very quickly. So organize as best as you can, collect what is best for your campus. On our campus, we're petitioning for every course, even the in-person ones, to have an online option for students that might not be able to afford to come back to the country, specifically international students. The good thing with that is that it also encompasses students that might have severe immunocompromisations. So if you're a student who is terrified of taking the bus because it's a life and death question, then you shouldn't have to. And the university should allow you to have an option to not have to come to campus. So when international students win like that, so do other people. So organize in a manner that makes sure that several demographics are also being recognized and supported.
Absolutely. And Ayat, what is your perspective on what student leaders should be taking, what student leaders should be doing for international students who won't be able to return to Canada for the fall term due to the pandemic?
I definitely agree with Ankit with whatever he said, but I also believe that asking questions is a basic thing, that everybody should be able to ask questions to the university authorities. Just simple questions like, if I'm not able to come back, how are my lectures going to go on? How is, for example, if my study permit is expiring, how am I supposed to renew it? If I'm a new student, like fall 2020 new student, how am I supposed to apply for a study permit because I'm not going to be in Canada? So I think the basic thing is you're supposed to ask the questions and really screw the university up to answer them. And I think that'll get the job done.
Love it. Ask questions, organize, and organize for collective action. I love that. The next question is from OICE Student Collective, and I'll let Wesam take this on. What have been the federal, provincial response to the CFS campaign regarding international students?
Sure, I'd love to answer that. I just want to weigh in on the previous question, if that's okay. So I think one of the challenges that face the student leaders is like, some of them are domestic students, so they don't actually know what the international students are going through. And even if some of them are international students, you will find that each student experience is unique, meaning to say that if you're an international student from a country, you're having a totally different experience than a student from another country, specifically during COVID-19. So my advice is just have different platforms to listen to the students. Host webinars, host open, try to listen to the concerns of international students so that you're doing your due diligence to basically transfer those concerns to the administration, along with the data that backs it up. So try to collect some testimonials, try to make the challenges that international students are facing, try to make it more transparent and more visual, I'd say, more visible. With regards to the second question about like what has been the federation doing, so CFS has actually has taken on the initiative from day one to take the international students into consideration during through their campaigns. So Fairness for International Students campaign has been a very active campaign since COVID-19. We have highlighted how unfair it is to exclude international students from CESB. We have collected a lot of testimonials. We have collaborated with Migrant Students United. So I would say that CFS has been doing a lot of the campaigning work, whether on the provincial or the federal level.
And I'll add to that with the response from the federal level, at the very least, has been very subpar. We had communication with Minister Qualtrough at the time, insisted international students be included in the Canadian Emergency Student Benefit to no avail. We have been pushing at every opportunity that we had with the federal government, and it is really frustrating to see that if it's not the collective action of hundreds of students and community and the public at large coming together and picking up the phone or sending an email to your MP or directly to Minister Qualtrough, no change is really going to come into effect. It is really the matter of people coming together to push for it, because it is very clear at this point that the federal government has no intention of being humane or protecting international students. And I'll encourage folks to go to cfs-fce.ca and click on the different tools to pressure Minister Qualtrough to insist that international students should be included on the CESB, and everybody, all students, regardless, should be given $2,000 a month on income supports, because it is really at the hands of collective action to really see the great victories that it comes when we have strength in numbers. And just to go off on the terms of, we are in the middle of a health crisis, and we know that the University Health Insurance Plan, UHIP, is offered to international students in Ontario instead of OHIP. So do you think that UHIP actually provides adequate medical coverage to international students? And what are some unique challenges international students face in accessing healthcare? So I'll start with Ankit to answer this question.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That one's very much, it hits the nail on the head and is very important. It's very topical. And the answer is no, it's not. It's not as good. I mean, many would argue that OHIP itself could use some reform, but specifically in the context of UHIP, and for context, students in colleges have CHIP, that's the college health insurance plan. They're both equivalent, they're both expensive, international students pay for them. And it has the classic struggles of anybody would have with private health insurance, because that's what it is. It's a private health insurance company trying to give you a similar plan as the government would. And so after we pay for it, we go through the similar struggles as if, let's say you were in the States, where if you're outside of the network, you might not have the same coverage. So within my city, there are like 3 dentists and 2 hospitals, and one of them don't take UHIP. So if I go to them, then they wouldn't cover me. One of them don't take the university, my student union's health benefits. If I go there, they won't cover me. And in those cases, the argument that's made is like, oh yeah, but you just have to pay up front and they'll reimburse you later. But I might not have $600 to dish out just because I have to go see somebody for a simple consultation. It's unrealistic to expect everybody to have that much money just laying around. And I think that feeds into the same stereotype about international students being loaded, which is largely untrue. Like, I'm here on a loan, man. Like, I owe big money. And that also then further translates into the fact that we are at the mercy of these private enterprises. If today they decide they don't wish to cover COVID-19 testing for international students, we won't be covered for COVID-19. And then the next time I go through one of those drive-throughs, or if I go get tested, I'll have to pay for it. And we know that they're not exactly the cheapest tests and extremely painful, besides the fact. One of my favorite examples to give anyone is if you're in Ottawa and you have to go to a hospital in Ottawa, chances are UHIP might be accepted. If you just cross the border, go to Gatineau and, I don't know, fall there, and you have to go to the hospital, chances are you might not be covered because UHIP in many cases is not accepted outside of the province unless those are very fringe providers that are within the providers network. So if you're with Sun Life, then if the hospital is within Sun Life's network and you have their UHIP, then you might be covered. But these are very specific cases. And if we're going to try to make a plan that makes sense and gives international students the same experience as a domestic student, either iron all of these things out and make us not pay for it, or just give us all OHIP, which is just less administrative cost for everybody.
Absolutely, so true what you're saying, especially in terms of right now, like, so what is, if you're not in UHIP, you're just not covered for COVID-19, like how irresponsible it is for the province of Ontario and the federal government, again, to like have international students here and just no supports whatsoever. And Ayat, what do you think are some unique challenges international students face when accessing healthcare? And like, do you think that you have provides adequate healthcare?
No, I think UHIP is ridiculous and it needs to have a reform. It's just, you know, I get so passionate about this that like we pay so much. I mean, it's like crazy amount of fees that we pay and still we don't get the services that we are entitled to. I mean, look at the amount of fees that we pay. And like, for example, just speaking off of experience, I went to the dentist in November. My bill was $800 and it didn't get covered. I went to the dentist in February, bill was $500, didn't get covered. So it's just like, I have insurance, but it doesn't cover it. So what's the point of keeping it? It's just ridiculous and it needs a big transformation. And just like Ankit said, maybe just give OHIP to every international student and release the pain from everyone.
Absolutely. What is your perspective, Wesam, on the UHIP?
So it's absolutely not enough. I would say that UHIP, I would categorize it as a failure in the system. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we as international students need to think twice before we actually pay the physician or the doctor a visit. Because in most of the cases, the network is not as explicit as the network for OHIP. So we have to actually check within the network what clinics can we visit. And we also need to check whether we will have to pay out of pocket or not. And in most of the cases, even if you're gonna get a refund for what you paid out of pocket, you're not actually able to afford this kind of money on the spot. You're not able to pay $800 in one day and wait for a refund. And there are cases where you're actually not even covered and you will just have to pay and not get a refund. And COVID-19 actually highlighted that the government didn't rely on UHEB when it came to COVID-19. So the fact that the government gave the benefits of public health insurance to international students and immigrants when it comes to things related to COVID-19 shows that the system is actually unreliable and we can't just depend on UHEB. And we actually contribute a lot to the economy. So like there has been a statistics for example, in 2018, international students and their families contributed $21.6 billion to the Canadian economy. And we pay taxes. And that makes you question the whole system. If we're already paying that much, as Ayat mentioned, why don't we get benefits? Why do we have to think twice before going into the physician? I think that to have someone in that position of like weighing your health, it's unethical to put anyone in that position, especially in a country with a universal health care. So I would say UHEB doesn't work.
Absolutely. And it is true. I mean, it is profiting over international students that are already being used as cash cow. It's unreliable and it's not really helping anyone. And just as a fun fact, which is, well, it's more like a sad fact, is that Ontario used to cover international students' health plan back in the 90s, and then they switched, and then they stopped covering afterwards, and with the excuse that of budget cuts or austerity. But it just further shows that budgets are about priorities, and the health and safety of people coming here and studying in universities of colleges should be a priority. And if we are a country that prides itself on having universal access to healthcare, it is really shameful and irresponsible for international students to not have OHIP. When we know it happened in the past, it can definitely happen again. And right now there is a huge need for that access, that universal access to healthcare, given the current situation. So thank you so much for all your perspectives on that.